A dying horse, skeletal and broken, lay helpless under an oak tree, its faint whinny begging for help. When a kind-hearted woman rushed to its side, she had no idea the horrors this innocent creature had endured, or the shocking secret its scars would reveal. At the vet clinic, the truth began to unfold, exposing a dark and twisted past that would ignite a fight for justice. Who hurt this horse? And what did the vet discover that left everyone speechless? Comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Selena River's wooden porch as she settled into her favorite rocking chair. Steam rose from her coffee mug, carrying the rich aroma of fresh brew into the crisp autumn air. Her sanctuary, nestled in rolling hills and surrounded by maple trees wearing their fall colors, was her piece of heaven on earth. Selena closed her eyes and listened to the familiar sounds of morning. Birds chirping their greetings, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, and the occasional soft nickering from the barn, where her rescued horses waited for breakfast. A smile tugged at her lips as she heard Daisy, her gentle brown mare, call out her usual morning hello. "I'm coming, girl," Selena said softly, taking one last sip of coffee before standing up. The worn wooden steps creaked under her boots as she made her way down to the yard, grabbing the feed bucket from its hook by the door. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she walked toward the paddocks, her mind already running through her morning routine. But halfway there, an unfamiliar sound stopped her in her tracks. A whinny, distant and filled with such pain, it made her heart squeeze in her chest. Selena stood still, straining to hear it again. The sound came once more, louder this time, a desperate cry that seemed to echo through the trees behind her property. Her hands trembled as she set down the feed bucket. "Hold on, everyone," she called to her waiting horses. "Something's wrong." She rushed back to the house, her heart pounding. Grabbing her truck keys and a heavy-duty flashlight from the mudroom, she hurried toward the tree line where the cry had come from. The woods grew darker as she pushed deeper into the forest, branches reaching overhead like gnarled fingers blocking out the morning light. Thorny bushes caught at her jacket, but she pressed on, following the increasingly urgent sounds of distress. "I'm coming," she called out, hoping her voice would offer some comfort to the suffering animal. "Hold on." After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Selena broke through into a small clearing. Her breath caught in her throat. There, beneath a massive oak tree, lay a horse so thin its ribs looked like prison bars against its skin. The animal's coat, which might once have been a rich white color, was now dull and patchy. Fresh cuts and old scars marked its body like a cruel map of suffering. The horse's head lifted slightly at her approach, and Selena found herself looking into eyes that held both deep pain and a flicker of hope. Those eyes seemed to reach right into her soul, pleading for help. Moving slowly, Selena knelt beside the fallen horse. "You're safe now," she whispered, carefully extending her hand. When the horse didn't flinch away, she gently stroked its neck, feeling every rib and bone beneath her fingers. Her heart broke at the evidence of such severe neglect. "You poor thing," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. She knew right then that she had to help this horse, no matter what it took. "I'm going to get you out of here." Selena raced back to her sanctuary, her boots pounding against the ground. Her heart hammered in her chest as she threw open the barn doors and rushed to prepare her horse trailer. Years of experience helped her move quickly, despite her shaking hands. "Easy, easy," she muttered to herself, filling a large bucket with fresh water. She grabbed an armful of the softest blankets she kept for emergency rescues, tucking them under her arm while hooking up the trailer to her truck with practiced movements. Back in the clearing, Selena approached the injured horse with slow, deliberate steps. The animal's eyes followed her every movement, but there was less fear now, more desperation. She set the water bucket down with an easy reach. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said softly. The horse stretched its neck toward the water, muscles trembling with effort. As it drank deeply, Selina's heart lifted slightly. At least the poor creature trusted her enough for this. Getting the horse into the trailer proved challenging. Selina spoke in gentle, continuous tones as she worked, encouraging each small step forward. The horse stumbled several times, its weakness evident in every movement, but somehow found the strength to keep going. When the trailer door finally closed, Selina let out a shaky breath of relief. During the drive to Dr. Rachel Martin's clinic, questions tumbled through Selina's mind. The horse's condition spoke of prolonged abuse, but who would do such a thing? And how had it ended up in her woods? She gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting back tears of anger and sadness. The veterinary clinic's staff burst into action the moment she pulled up. Dr. Rachel Martin, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, directed her team with calm efficiency as they helped the horse from the trailer. "Easy does it," Rachel called out, her experienced hands supporting the horse's weakened frame. "Let's get her into the examination room." Under the bright clinic lights, the extent of the horse's injuries became painfully clear. Rachel's face grew increasingly serious as she examined the various wounds and noted the prominent ribs and hip bones. "Some of these wounds look deliberate," Rachel said gravely, gesturing to several precise cuts along the horse's flanks. The statement made Selina's stomach turn. "Who would do something like this?" Selina whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She stood close by as Rachel and her team worked, administering fluids through an IV and giving injections for pain relief. "You're safe now," Selina murmured, stroking the horse's neck while Rachel continued her work. Despite the staff's gentle suggestions that she go home and rest, Selina settled into one of the hard plastic chairs in the waiting room. She couldn't bear to leave, not while the veterinary team worked through the night to save this broken creature that had somehow found its way to her. The morning sun filtered through the clinic's windows, casting long shadows across Selina's face as she stirred on the hard waiting room bench. Her neck protested with a dull ache as she sat up, rolling her shoulders to ease the stiffness. The events of the previous night came rushing back, and she quickly made her way to check on the rescued horse. Dr. Rachel Martin was already there, reviewing charts and checking vital signs. She looked up as Selina entered, offering a tired but reassuring smile. She made it through the night. The worst is behind us, though we have a long road ahead. Selina released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you, Rachel, for everything." Over the next few weeks, Selina fell into a new routine. Each day, she'd arrive at the clinic with fresh apples and carrots, spending hours sitting beside the horse's stall. She would talk softly about her sanctuary, about the other horses there, and about nothing in particular. The sound of her voice seemed to soothe the injured mare. Gradually, small changes began to appear. The horse's eyes grew brighter, more alert. One morning, as Selina approached with her usual treats, a soft nickering sound greeted her. The gentle greeting brought tears to her eyes. "I think we should call you Hope," Selina said one afternoon, reaching out to stroke the horse's nose. "Because that's what you have, hope and strength, even after everything you've been through." The name stuck, feeling right for this survivor who was slowly learning to trust again. One crisp morning, Rachel called Selina into the examination room, her expression serious. "There's something you need to see," she said, leading Selina to where Hope stood quietly. Rachel carefully parted the slowly healing coat along Hope's neck and shoulders, revealing a pattern of precise, linear scars. These aren't from accidents or neglect, Rachel explained, her finger tracing the air above one particularly clear mark. These are surgical scars. Someone was performing medical procedures on her. Selina's stomach clenched as the implications sank in. She looked at Hope, imagining the fear and pain she must have endured at the hands of whoever had treated her like a test subject rather than a living, feeling creature. She deserves so much better than this, Selina said, her voice catching with emotion. Later that afternoon, Selina sat beside Hope's stall, her mind still processing the disturbing discovery. "I promise you," she whispered, "I'm going to find out who did this to you." As she gently ran her fingers through Hope's growing mane, the mare turned her head and softly nuzzled Selina's hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about the trust slowly building between them. A week had passed since Hope's surgery, and the changes in her condition were remarkable. Selina watched with joy as the mare stood steadily on her legs, eagerly accepting the apple slices and carrots from her outstretched palm. The sight of Hope's improving appetite brought happy tears to Selina's eyes. Even the veterinarian had commented on the horse's extraordinary recovery during the last checkup. "That's it, sweet girl," Selina murmured, stroking Hope's neck as she crunched on a carrot. "You're getting stronger every day." The mare's coat was beginning to shine, the dull and matted fur gradually giving way to a healthier sheen. Hope's eyes, once dim with pain and fear, now held a spark of life that made Selina's heart swell with pride. Later that afternoon, Selina drove to Miller's feed store to pick up supplies. The familiar bell above the door chimed as she entered, and the comforting smell of hay and sweet feed filled her nostrils. As she walked down the grain aisle, the low rumble of voices caught her attention. Two elderly men stood near the register, their conversation drifting over to where she stood. "You remember McCleary's place?" one man asked, adjusting his worn baseball cap. "Out past the old logging road?" "That breeding farm?" the other replied, shaking his head. "That place was shut down years ago. Bad news. Heard rumors about weird experiments, but nothing ever came of it. Police went out there a few times, but it was always quiet when they showed up." Selina froze, her hand hovering over a bag of feed. Something about their words made her skin prickle. She tried to appear casual as she listened, but her heart was racing. The men's voices carried a weight that suggested they knew more than they were saying. Back home that evening, Selina sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. The warm glow of her desk lamp cast shadows on the wall as she typed "McCleary's breeding farm" into the search engine. Her coffee grew cold beside her as hours ticked by while she clicked through various links, but found little beyond forum posts and local gossip. Most sites mentioned the farm's closure, but offered no concrete details about what had happened there. A few cryptic comments hinted at late-night deliveries and strange noises, but nothing substantial. Frustrated, Selina grabbed a notepad and began jotting down what she knew: the location where she'd found Hope, the surgical scars, and now this mysterious McCleary's place. There had to be a connection. She decided she needed to revisit the clearing where she'd discovered Hope. Perhaps she'd missed something important. The thought of returning there made her nervous, but she knew she had to follow every lead. That night, sleep eluded her. Selina lay in bed, staring at the shadowy ceiling above. Her mind wouldn't stop racing, filled with images of Hope's scars and questions about what had happened at McCleary's farm. The wind whispered through the trees outside her window, carrying echoes of secrets yet to be uncovered. Rolling onto her side, she whispered into the darkness, "Whatever they did to you, I'll make sure it never happens again. I promise." The morning sun cast long shadows across Selina's sanctuary as she leaned against the paddock fence, watching Hope graze. The mare moved with growing confidence, her steps more assured than they had been just days ago. Her coat gleamed in the early light, a far cry from the matted, dull fur she'd had when Selina first found her. "Looking good, girl," Selina called softly. Hope's ear twitched at the sound of her voice, and she lifted her head briefly before returning to the fresh grass. After finishing her morning chores, Selina settled onto her porch with a steaming mug of coffee and a plate of toast. The peaceful morning gave her time to think about McCleary's place and its possible connection to Hope. The mare's surgical scars told a story, but Selina still couldn't piece it all together. Later that afternoon, while checking on the barn's supplies, something caught her eye. Fresh tire tracks marked the dirt path leading to her property, the deep grooves still sharp and clear. Selina's stomach tightened. She lived alone and rarely had visitors, especially unannounced ones. The tracks weren't from her truck. They were wider, deeper. That night, as Selina sat reading in her living room, a soft rustling sound outside her window made her freeze. The noise was faint but distinct against the usual nighttime sounds. Setting down her book, she moved cautiously to the window and peered out. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, but nothing else moved in the darkness. Grabbing her flashlight from the kitchen drawer, Selina stepped out onto her front porch. The beam of light cut through the darkness as she swept it across her yard. "Hello?" she called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Is someone there?" Only cricket chirps answered her. After a thorough check of the property, she returned inside, double-checking all the locks before heading to bed. The next morning, Selina headed to the barn early, eager to check on Hope. But as she approached the large wooden doors, something made her stop short. A piece of paper was pinned to the wood, fluttering slightly in the morning breeze. Her hands trembled as she pulled the note free and read the crude, bold letters. "Stay away from things you don't understand." Back in her kitchen, Selina sat at her worn wooden table, studying the threatening message. Her jaw tightened as she looked toward the barn where Hope rested safely in her stall. "Whoever you are," she whispered, her voice firm despite her fear, "I'm not backing down." The morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Selina packed her backpack. She double-checked her supplies, flashlight with fresh batteries, a small notepad, pen, and a thermos filled with hot chamomile tea. Her hands moved with purpose, but her heart raced at the thought of what she might discover. Before leaving, she stopped by Hope's stall. The mare nickered softly, pressing her nose against Selina's palm. "I'll be back soon, girl," Selina whispered, giving Hope a gentle pat. The woods felt different in the morning light, less threatening than when she'd first found Hope, but still heavy with secrets. Selina's boots crunched over fallen leaves as she pushed deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler under the thick canopy of trees, and the cheerful morning bird song faded to distant echoes. After 30 minutes of walking, she reached the familiar clearing where Hope had laid that desperate night. The gnarled oak tree stood silent, its branches casting strange shadows on the ground. This time, with daylight on her side, Selina noticed something she'd missed before: a narrow path, almost hidden by undergrowth, leading away from the clearing. Her heart pounding, Selina followed the overgrown trail. Thorny vines caught at her jacket as she pushed through, but she pressed on. After several minutes, she stopped short. Through the trees, she could make out the dark shape of a building, a stable, its wooden walls green with moss and decay. The structure looked ready to collapse, its roof partially caved in and doors hanging crookedly from rusted hinges. Selina approached cautiously, testing each step on the rotting boards of the entrance. The musty smell of decay filled her nose as she entered. Inside, the sight made her stomach turn. Heavy chains hung from metal loops bolted into the walls, their links covered in rust. In what must have been a treatment area, she found old medical instruments scattered across a metal table, their surfaces dulled by time and neglect. Piles of moldy straw filled the corners of the stalls, telling silent stories of suffering. As Selina moved deeper into the stable, something caught her eye. Half buried in debris in a corner lay a leather-bound journal, its pages warped from moisture but still readable. With trembling fingers, she picked it up and began to read the faded handwriting. Project Concord, progressing. Enhancing speed and endurance. Subject, Bubber 14, rejected, discarded. The clinical coldness of the words made Selina's blood run cold. She thought of Hope's surgical scars, her emaciated condition when found. Had she been one of these subjects? Clutching the journal tightly, Selina hurried back through the woods toward home. The morning's peaceful mood had vanished, replaced by an urgent need to uncover the truth. Back in her warm kitchen, she spread the journal's damp pages carefully across her table, preparing herself for a long evening of disturbing revelations. The next morning dawned crisp and clear as Selina made her way to the barn, the journal's disturbing revelations still weighing on her mind. Yet there was a new determination in her steps, a sense of purpose that burned brighter than her fears. As she approached Hope's stall, the mare's soft nicker greeted her, bringing a smile to her face. "Good morning, beautiful girl," Selina said, reaching out to stroke Hope's neck. The mare's coat had begun to regain its shine, no longer dull and matted as it had been when Selina first found her. After their morning feeding routine, Selina led Hope to the small paddock behind the barn. The mare's steps were cautious but steady, a far cry from the skeletal, trembling creature she'd discovered in the woods. Selina began their daily exercises, starting with simple walking exercises to help build Hope's muscle strength. Hope hesitated at first, her movements stiff and uncertain, but Selina remained patient, speaking in soft, encouraging tones and offering small pieces of apple as rewards. "That's it, girl," she murmured as Hope took careful steps beside her. "Nice and easy." The afternoon sun was high in the sky when something remarkable happened. As Selina stood near the fence, watching Hope graze, the mare suddenly lifted her head. Without any prompting, Hope broke into a smooth trot across the paddock, her movements fluid and natural. Selina's breath caught in her throat, and tears welled in her eyes at the sight. It was the first time Hope had moved so freely on her own. Over the next few hours, Selina noticed other changes in Hope's behavior. The mare no longer kept her distance as she had in the beginning. Instead, she would seek out Selina's company, gently bumping her shoulder with her nose or following her around the paddock like a loyal shadow. When Selina paused to check the fence, Hope stood nearby, her warm breath tickling Selina's hair. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the barn floor, Selina sat on a hay bale beside Hope. She ran a soft brush over the mare's coat in long, gentle strokes. The peaceful moment felt precious after everything they'd been through. "You're a fighter, Hope," Selina whispered, pausing to rest her hand on the mare's shoulder. "And I'll make sure no one ever hurts you again." The morning sun filtered through the clinic's windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor as Selina walked through the familiar doors, clutching the weathered journal to her chest like a shield. Dr. Rachel Martin stood at the reception desk, organizing patient files, and greeted her with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw the serious expression etched across Selina's face. "Rachel, I found something in the woods," Selina said, her voice tight with tension as she placed the journal on the examination table. The leather cover was cracked and worn, its pages yellowed with age. "It was in an old stable, near where I found Hope, hidden under some loose floorboards." Rachel adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and opened the journal carefully, her practiced fingers gentle with the fragile pages. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first few pages, her normally calm demeanor giving way to visible concern. This is disturbing," she said, flipping through the pages with growing unease. She paused at a detailed diagram of a horse's skeletal structure, covered in precise measurements and annotations written in a cramped, clinical hand. "It looks like someone was experimenting on horses, trying to enhance traits like speed and endurance. But these methods—" Rachel shook her head, her face pale. "They're inhumane and unethical. No legitimate veterinary practice would ever approve this." Setting the journal aside with trembling fingers, Rachel moved to her computer and pulled up Hope's medical records, including detailed photos of her scars. The images showed a stark map of old wounds and surgical marks across the mare's body. She compared them to the surgical procedures outlined in the journal's pages, her face growing more troubled with each damning comparison. "These match surgical procedures described here," she said, pointing to specific entries with a steady finger. "Selina, it's very likely Hope was part of this Concord program. The placement of these scars, the surgical techniques, it's all documented right here." Selina's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her knuckles white with tension as her voice trembled with barely contained emotion. "Who could do something like this to innocent animals?" Rachel placed a gentle hand on Selina's shoulder, her touch carrying years of compassionate experience. "We need to be careful here," she advised, her voice low and serious. "These people, whoever they are, they've already shown they're willing to threaten you. Remember those warning notes?" She tapped the journal thoughtfully. "This journal is a start, but it's not enough to shut down whoever's behind this. We need more concrete evidence." On the drive home, Selina's thoughts were heavy with everything she'd learned, the weight of the discovery pressing down on her like a physical thing. As she pulled into her gravel driveway, she could see Hope grazing peacefully in the paddock, her dappled coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. The sight of the gentle mare, knowing the horrors she had endured, made Selina's heart ache with a mixture of love and determination. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Hope. I promise," she whispered to herself, her words carrying the weight of an oath. The morning sun cast long shadows across the barn floor as Selina swept away loose hay. The rhythmic motion of her broom paused when she noticed Hope's sudden change in behavior. The mare stood rigid, her ears pricked forward and nostrils flaring, her eyes fixed intently on something beyond the paddock fence. Selina set down her broom and walked outside, following Hope's intense gaze. Her eyes scanned the tree line until she spotted movement, a figure partially concealed in the shadows. A man in dark clothing stood watching, barely visible among the trees. "Hey!" Selina called out, her voice sharp with alarm. "What are you doing there?" The man turned quickly, disappearing into the dense foliage. Selina's heart pounded, but determination overtook her fear. She hurried toward where the stranger had been standing, careful to stay alert as she searched the area. Near the edge of her property, something caught her eye. A notebook lying in the grass, its pages fluttering in the breeze. Selina picked it up with trembling hands and rushed back to her house. In her kitchen, she spread the notebook open on the table. Her breath caught as she examined page after page of detailed sketches, horses with surgical markings, anatomical diagrams, and precise notes about procedures. The words "Concord Program" appeared repeatedly throughout the pages. Her stomach turned when she found a rough map of her own property, with an X marked ominously near her barn. With shaking fingers, Selina dialed Dr. Rachel's number. "Rachel," she said, when the veterinarian answered. "Someone was watching the barn. He dropped a notebook. It's full of information about the Concord Program, and there's a map of my property." "Take photos of everything," Rachel advised firmly. Document it all before you do anything else. We should consider bringing this to the police. This is evidence of stalking at the very least." After hanging up, Selina walked back to the barn. She checked each lock twice, adjusting the security cameras she'd installed just days before. Standing at her kitchen window, she stared into the darkening woods, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her shoulders. "I won't let them take you, Hope," she whispered, watching the mare's silhouette in the barn. The quiet evening shattered with the sound of breaking glass. Selina's book tumbled from her hands as she leapt up from her armchair. Her heart pounding, she grabbed her flashlight and ran toward the barn, her feet crunching on gravel. The beam of her flashlight revealed glittering shards of glass scattered across the barn floor. Cold night air whistled through the broken windows, and Hope's stall door swung open, creaking on its hinges. Panic gripped Selina's chest as she searched for her mare. She found Hope huddled in the corner of her stall, her dark eyes wide with fear. The mare's sides heaved with rapid breaths, her whole body trembling. "It's okay, girl," Selina whispered, approaching slowly. "I'm here now." As she calmed Hope with gentle words and soft touches, Selina swept her flashlight around the barn. The beam caught something on the far wall that made her blood run cold. Crude red letters stretched across the wooden planks. "Leave it alone!" With shaking hands, Selina called the police. The officer who answered sounded bored, offering only a half-hearted promise to increase patrols in the area. Frustrated tears pricked at her eyes as she dialed Dr. Rachel's number next. "Selina? What's wrong?" Rachel's voice was warm with concern. "Someone broke into the barn," Selina explained, her voice cracking. "They left a message on the wall. Hope's terrified, but she's not hurt." "Thank goodness she's okay," Rachel said. "Listen to me. Be extra careful. Don't go anywhere alone, especially at night. Keep watching Hope closely for any signs of stress." The next morning, Selina checked her security cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the intruder. Her stomach dropped when she found gaps in the footage, whole hours missing from the previous night's recording. Someone had deliberately erased the evidence. As she stared at the blank screen, pieces started falling into place. The notebook, the erased footage, the threatening message. Whoever was behind the Concord program was watching her every move. At her kitchen table, Selina spread out the mysterious notebook and journal. Her gaze drifted to the barn, visible through her window, where Hope was finally beginning to settle after the night's trauma. Her hands curled into tight fists. "You can try to scare me," she murmured, "but I'm not giving up." The morning sun filtered through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the floor as Selina waited nervously in Dr. Rachel's office. Her fingers drummed absently on the armrest of her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. The door opened with a soft click, and Rachel entered with a woman in her mid-30s, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing a crisp blazer and carrying a well-worn leather briefcase. "Selina, this is Sarah James," Rachel said warmly, gesturing between them. "She's the animal rights advocate I told you about, and one of the most dedicated people I know." Sarah's firm handshake and direct gaze put Selina at ease immediately. Her brown eyes held a mix of compassion and determination that spoke volumes. "Rachel filled me in on Hope's situation," Sarah said, settling into a chair across from Selina. "I've dealt with similar cases before, and I want to help. No horse should suffer like that." They spread the evidence across Rachel's desk, the weathered journal with its dog-eared pages, the dropped notebook filled with hastily scrawled notes, and the heartbreaking photos of Hope's injuries. Sarah examined each item carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute, occasionally making notes in a small pad she pulled from her briefcase. "These surgical techniques," Sarah said, pointing to detailed diagrams in the journal, her finger tracing the cruel illustrations. They match reports I've seen before. There's a pattern here that connects to Victor Grayson's operations. The similarities are impossible to ignore. Victor Grayson? Selina asked, leaning forward in her chair. The businessman with that huge equestrian estate out on County Line Road? The one who's always in the society pages? Sarah nodded grimly, her jaw tightening. He presents himself as a legitimate breeder, but there have been whispers about his practices for years. Dark rumors that never quite go away. We've never had enough evidence to prove anything, though. He's very careful about covering his tracks. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a quick call, speaking in hushed tones. Minutes later, a man with tired eyes and rumpled clothes arrived at the clinic, looking like he just rolled out of bed after an all-night writing session. This is Jake Wilson, Sarah introduced him. He's broken several major stories about animal cruelty cases. He's the best investigative journalist I know when it comes to exposing these operations. Jake looked skeptical as he flipped through the journal, his expression guarded. But his demeanor changed dramatically when Selina showed him photos of Hope's scars. His eyes widened, and he began nodding slowly. These matched the surgical descriptions exactly, he murmured, his professional interest clearly piqued. He pulled out a small magnifying glass to examine the photos more closely. The group huddled around Rachel's desk, developing a plan, their voices low and intense. Grayson's hosting an equestrian gala next weekend, Sarah explained, pulling up an invitation on her phone. It's our chance to observe him up close and possibly make some connections. These events are where people tend to let their guard down. That evening, Selina sat at her desk in the warm glow of her lamp, recording the day's events in her journal, her pen moving swiftly across the pages. Through her window, she could see Hope peacefully grazing in the moonlight, her silver-dappled coat gleaming in the soft light. "We're not alone anymore, girl," she whispered, pressing her palm against the cool glass. "We're going to get to the bottom of this, I promise you that." The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors as Selina and Sarah made their way through the crowd of well-dressed guests. Selina tugged nervously at her borrowed evening gown, a midnight blue silk that felt foreign against her skin. She was far more comfortable in riding clothes and boots than in this elegant attire, feeling like an imposter among the social elite who moved effortlessly through the space. "Stop fidgeting," Sarah whispered, giving her friend's arm a reassuring squeeze. "You look fine. Remember why we're here." Selina took a deep breath and nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the musical tinkle of champagne glasses. The sounds of polite laughter and conversation echoed off the high ceilings. Across the room, Victor Grayson held court among a group of admirers, his silver hair gleaming under the lights as he gestured animatedly with his champagne glass. "Let's move closer," Sarah suggested, smoothing her own emerald green dress. "But not too close. We don't want to draw attention." They drifted toward a nearby group, pretending to admire a massive ice sculpture of prancing horses, while listening to Grayson's booming voice carry across the marble floor. "The breeding program is revolutionary," he was saying, his chest puffed with pride. "We're pushing boundaries that most wouldn't dare approach. The future of equestrian excellence lies in innovation." Jake moved smoothly through the crowd in his crisp waiter's uniform, offering champagne while discreetly placing tiny microphones under tables and behind decorative plants. His movements were so natural and practiced that no one gave him a second glance as he performed his covert task. Near the ornate mahogany bar, Selina overheard a cluster of men in expensive suits discussing their investments, their voices carrying just enough for her to catch their words. "The special breeding projects are expensive," one said, swirling his scotch, "but the results are worth it. These horses are performing beyond normal limits. The returns are astronomical." Selena's fingers tightened around her crystal champagne glass, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to confront them, to demand answers about Hope's scars and the other horses who had suffered. But Sarah's steady presence beside her kept her grounded in their mission. "Miss Rivers," a smooth voice said behind her, sending a chill down her spine. "What a pleasure to see you here." Selena turned to find Victor Grayson standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, his smile not quite reaching his cold gray eyes. He took her hand in a firm handshake that lasted a moment too long, his grip just shy of painful. "I've heard about your little sanctuary," he said, his tone condescending. "How noble of you to take in unwanted animals. Such charitable work." "Every horse deserves care and respect," Selena replied carefully, fighting to keep her voice steady despite her racing pulse. Grayson's smile tightened, showing a flash of teeth. "You seem quite curious, Miss Rivers. Be careful. Curiosity can be dangerous in our world. Not everyone appreciates enthusiastic advocates." Later that night, Selena sat in her living room with Sarah and Jake, listening to the recordings while rain pattered against the windows. The conversations were careful, coded, but the implications were clear. Words like enhancement, special procedures, and disposal of failed subjects painted a disturbing picture of systematic abuse. "It's not enough for legal action," Jake said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "But it confirms our suspicions. Grayson's definitely involved in the Concord program. He's right in the middle of it all." Selena thought of Hope's scars and Grayson's threatening smile, her determination growing stronger. "Then we keep digging," she said firmly, her voice steady with resolve. "No matter what it takes. Those horses need us." The morning sun streamed through Selena's kitchen windows as she sat with Sarah and Jake, their coffee growing cold while they reviewed the recordings from the gala. Jake's laptop played snippet after snippet of conversations, each one hinting at Grayson's involvement, but stopping short of outright confession. "Listen to this part again," Sarah said, pointing to the audio file. They heard Grayson's voice, smooth and controlled. "The breeding program is revolutionary. We're pushing boundaries." "He's careful with his words," Jake noted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "But there's definitely something there." Jake pulled up another window on his laptop, revealing satellite images of Grayson's estate. "See these areas?" He pointed to several blacked-out sections. "They're restricted. No public access, no aerial views. That's not normal for a regular breeding facility." Sarah leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "I remember a case from about 5 years ago. A former employee tried to blow the whistle about an underground facility, something about special projects in horse breeding. The case was buried before it went anywhere." "We need eyes on that property," Selena said firmly. They spent the next hour planning their surveillance. Jake had brought his professional-grade drone, equipped with a high-resolution camera and night vision capabilities. They chose a secluded spot on public land that overlooked the back of Grayson's estate. That evening, as darkness fell, they positioned themselves in the surveillance spot. Jake launched the drone, its quiet hum barely audible as it rose into the night sky. Through the drone's camera feed, they watched the activity below. "There," Selena whispered, pointing to the screen. A truck was backing up to a hidden entrance, its headlights dim. As they watched, several horses were let out, their ribs visible, their movements stiff and pained. The drone's camera zoomed in, revealing familiar surgical scars across their flanks and shoulders. "Those marks," Selena said, her voice tight, "they're just like Hope's." Sarah was already taking notes, documenting times and details. Jake maneuvered the drone carefully, capturing clear footage of the license plates and the faces of the handlers. During a lull in activity, Jake pulled up his research on his tablet. "Look at this. I found property records linking Grayson to McCleary's old farm through a shell company. He bought it right before the weird experiments started." Selena's eyes remained fixed on the drone footage, watching another group of injured horses being loaded into the truck. Her hands clenched into fists, knuckles white with tension. "We're getting closer," she said. "But it's not enough. We need to shut him down." The early morning mist clung to the grass as Selena led Hope into the paddock, their footsteps leaving gentle impressions in the dewy ground. The mare's coat gleamed in the soft light, a rich chestnut sheen that was a far cry from the matted, dull hair she'd had when Selena first found her. With gentle, practiced hands, Selena guided Hope through their morning routine of stretches and simple exercises designed to rebuild her muscle strength and restore her confidence. "That's it, girl," Selena encouraged as Hope lifted each leg in turn, holding the position just as they'd practiced. The mare's movements were becoming more fluid, more natural with each passing day, her eyes bright with newfound trust. As they moved into their walking exercises, Hope surprised Selena by breaking into a smooth trot, her hooves marking a steady rhythm against the earth. Selena's heart swelled with joy. But what happened next brought tears to her eyes. Hope transitioned into a tentative canter, her stride uncertain at first, but growing more confident with each step, as if remembering the freedom she once knew. "Oh my goodness," Selena called out, her voice thick with emotion. She watched in amazement as Hope circled the paddock, her mane catching the morning breeze like silk ribbons dancing in the wind. It wasn't the fastest canter, but it was beautiful in its own way, a testament to Hope's fighting spirit and will to recover. Later that afternoon, Dr. Rachel's truck pulled up the gravel driveway, the familiar crunch of tires announcing her arrival. She walked over to the paddock fence, where Selena was still working with Hope, her veterinary bag slung over one shoulder. "Look at her move," Rachel said, smiling broadly, her eyes tracking the mare's fluid movements. "She's like a different horse altogether." Selena patted Hope's neck proudly, feeling the warm strength beneath her palm. "She amazed me this morning, her first canter since I found her. I never expected it so soon." "You've given her a second chance," Rachel said, watching as Hope nuzzled Selena's shoulder affectionately, her breath warm against Selena's skin. "Not many horses come back from what she's been through. You should be proud." Selena's smile faded slightly, worry lines creasing her forehead. "I'm worried, Rachel. Grayson has connections everywhere. What if he tries to take her? I couldn't bear to see her suffer again." Rachel's expression grew serious, her professional demeanor taking over. "Maybe we should talk to the police again. Show them what we've found so far. The evidence is mounting." "Not yet," Selena replied, shaking her head firmly. "We need more evidence before they'll take us seriously. We can't risk tipping our hand too soon." As evening approached, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Selena sat on a hay bale in the barn, watching Hope contentedly munch on her dinner. The mare's peaceful expression and steady movements filled Selena with a sense of purpose and determination. "You're my inspiration, girl," Selena whispered into the growing darkness. "If you can fight through this, so can I. We're in this together." The fluorescent lights of the quiet diner buzzed overhead as Selena slid into the worn vinyl booth beside Sarah, the cracked leather squeaking beneath her. Jake sat across from them, his expression tense and his fingers drumming silently on the scratched tabletop as they waited for Lydia. The former employee had chosen this out-of-the-way spot, insisting it would be safer to meet after dark, away from prying eyes. When Lydia finally arrived, Selena noticed how the woman's eyes darted nervously around the nearly empty diner, lingering on each exit sign. She was thin, almost gaunt, with graying hair pulled back in a messy bun, and her hands shook so badly she nearly spilled the coffee as she clutched her cup like a lifeline. "I shouldn't be here," Lydia whispered, her voice barely audible over the clink of dishes from the kitchen and the distant murmur of the only other customers. "You're safe," Sarah assured her, reaching across the table to touch her trembling hand. "We just want to know what you saw. Nothing leaves this booth." Lydia took a deep breath that seemed to rattle in her chest. The Concord program. It wasn't just about breeding. Grayson wanted perfect horses. He'd do anything. Genetic experiments, forced breeding, brutal training methods. She paused, swallowing hard, her throat working visibly. The ones that didn't measure up, they just disappeared, like they never existed. Selina's stomach turned as she thought of Hope, wondering if she had been one of those discarded horses, another failed experiment meant to vanish without a trace. "There's something else," Lydia continued, leaning closer until her whispered words ghosted across the table. "Grayson's hosting an event at his estate next week. Invite only. Word is he's planning to showcase and sell horses from the program. The elite of the equestrian world will be there." Jake pulled out his notebook, but Lydia grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't write it down. Just remember, Friday night, 8 o'clock. The security will be focused on the main entrance." As they left the diner, stepping into the cool night air, Selina noticed a black SUV idling in the far corner of the parking lot. The overhead lights reflected off its tinted windows like a mirror, but she could make out a shadowy figure in the driver's seat, watching them with predatory stillness. Sarah noticed it too, gripping Selina's arm hard enough to leave marks. "Don't stare," she whispered through clenched teeth. The SUV's engine roared to life with a threatening growl, and it peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing against the asphalt and leaving dark rubber marks. Lydia let out a small cry that sounded like a wounded animal. "I can't do this," she gasped, backing away from them with wild eyes. "I've said too much already. Please, just leave me alone." Before anyone could stop her, she hurried to her car and drove away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness. Back at her farm, Selina methodically checked every lock and security camera, testing each one twice. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled each curtain closed, searching the darkness beyond for any sign of movement. She settled into a chair by the window, watching the darkness beyond her porch light's reach, where shadows seemed to shift and dance. "We're running out of time," she muttered to herself, her eyes fixed on the shadowy tree line, while her mind raced with possibilities, both hopeful and terrifying. The morning sun had barely risen when Selina's laptop chimed with a new email notification. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message, an exclusive invitation to Grayson's event, addressed to Caroline Bennett, the fake breeder identity Jake had carefully crafted. In Sarah's living room that afternoon, Jake paced back and forth as he drilled Selina on her cover story. "Remember, Caroline Bennett specializes in performance horses," he said, his voice firm but encouraging. "You've got breeding facilities in Kentucky." "And I'm interested in expanding my program," Selina recited, trying to keep her voice steady. "Looking for new bloodlines with exceptional speed and endurance traits." Sarah emerged from her bedroom carrying several elegant outfits. "You need to look the part," she said, laying them out carefully. "These people notice everything." They settled on a navy blue cocktail dress, sophisticated enough to blend in, but not flashy enough to draw unnecessary attention. Sarah pinned a delicate silver brooch to the neckline, adjusting it carefully. "The camera's completely hidden," she explained. "Just make sure nothing blocks it." Jake held up a designer handbag, showing Selina the tiny recording device nestled in its lining. "This will pick up any conversation within 10 feet, he said. "Try to get close to Grayson if you can." As twilight settled over the countryside, Selina drove her borrowed Mercedes toward Grayson's estate. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and she forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. The estate appeared on the horizon, a sprawling mansion ablaze with floodlights. Luxury cars lined the winding driveway. their polished surfaces gleaming. At the gate, 2 guards in dark suits checked her invitation and ID. Selina's pulse raced, but she maintained a cool smile. "Good evening," she said, her voice remarkably steady as she handed over her documents. After what felt like an eternity, they waved her through. She parked between a Bentley and a Rolls-Royce, taking one final steadying breath before stepping out into the cool evening air. The grand entrance hall took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and dozens of elegantly dressed guests mingling over champagne. Selina accepted a glass from a passing waiter, using it to mask her careful observation of the room. Then she saw him, Victor Grayson, holding court in a corner with several distinguished-looking men. He wore an impeccably tailored tuxedo, his silver hair and commanding presence drawing attention from across the room. "This is it," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders and moving deeper into the crowd. Selina wove through the crowd of well-dressed guests, her fingers tight around the stem of her champagne glass. The grand hall buzzed with conversation, snippets floating past her like leaves in the wind. "Breakthrough in performance enhancement," came a whisper from her left. "Genetic markers for speed," drifted from another group. She paused near a marble column, pretending to admire a massive oil painting while her hidden camera captured the scenes around her. The brooch felt heavy against her chest, a constant reminder of her purpose here. A server in a crisp black uniform approached with a silver tray. As he offered her a fresh glass of champagne, he smoothly slipped an envelope beneath it. Selina's heart jumped, but she maintained her composed expression as she accepted both. In a quiet corner, she opened the envelope to find a glossy pass marked "Private Viewing" in gold lettering. Below it were simple instructions. "East Wing, 9 p.m." At the appointed time, a stone-faced attendant led her through a maze of hallways. The sounds of the party faded behind them as they descended a short flight of stairs. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the lighting grew dimmer. They entered a room that reminded Selina of an art gallery, but instead of paintings, floor-to-ceiling glass panels lined the walls. Behind each panel stood a horse, their coats gleaming under strategic spotlights. A handler in a white coat stepped forward, addressing the small group of viewers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our exclusive collection," he said, his voice clinical and detached. "Each specimen has been carefully enhanced for maximum performance potential." Selina's stomach churned as they moved from panel to panel. The horses' coats had been expertly groomed to minimize the appearance of scars, but she knew what to look for. Surgical marks peeked through the shine, telling a story of suffering beneath the surface. Then she saw her, a bay mare with familiar markings around her flanks. The scars matched Hope's exactly. The handler droned on about improved cardiovascular capacity and enhanced muscle density, but Selina barely heard him. She positioned herself carefully, ensuring her brooch captured every detail. When they returned to the main hall, the party was in full swing. Selina's mind raced with everything she'd witnessed. As she passed the refreshment table, a familiar server, Jake in disguise, brushed past her. She felt paper slip into her hand, and she palmed it smoothly. In the powder room, she unfolded the note. "Security is tight. Watch your back." The paper trembled in her fingers as the full weight of her situation settled over her. Selina's hand shook as she connected the hidden camera to her laptop. The footage from Grayson's event filled the screen, revealing the stark reality of his operation. Each frame showed perfectly groomed horses with telltale surgical scars, their eyes dull despite their polished appearance. As she reviewed the private viewing footage, her heart stopped. One of the handlers, a tall man with steel gray hair, was looking directly at her brooch. His knowing smile sent chills down her spine. She rewound the footage several times, studying his face. There was no doubt. He knew he was being recorded. Morning brought little comfort. Selena went through her usual barn routine, but something felt off. The birds seemed unusually quiet, and the air felt heavy with tension. As she walked to the paddock with Hope's breakfast, she noticed fresh tire tracks in the gravel near her property line. A black SUV sat parked down the road, its windows tinted, too dark to see inside. Selena's hands trembled as she dialed Sarah's number. "I think they're watching me," she whispered into the phone, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's a car, and I found footprints by the barn that aren't mine." "Don't panic," Sarah advised. "Jake and I are nearby. We'll come check it out. Just stay alert and act normal." Selena tried to follow Sarah's advice, but anxiety gnawed at her stomach as she went about her evening chores. The sun was setting when she finished cleaning the paddock, casting long shadows across the property. Walking back to the barn, something felt wrong. The door was slightly ajar, though she distinctly remembered latching it. Her heart pounding, Selena rushed inside. Hope's stall door swung open, empty. The fresh hay she'd laid down that morning was undisturbed. No signs of struggle, just emptiness. A piece of paper had been pinned to the stall door. The crude handwriting blurred before Selena's eyes. "Stay out, or she disappears forever." Her legs gave out, and she crumpled to the barn floor. The rough wooden boards pressed against her knees as sobs racked her body. She fumbled for her phone, barely able to see the screen through her tears. Jake and Sarah arrived within minutes, finding Selena still kneeling in the barn. Sarah wrapped her arms around her friend, while Jake searched the property, flashlight beam cutting through the growing darkness. "The gate's intact," Jake reported, returning from his search. "They must have loaded her into a trailer. There are fresh tracks leading to the back road." They searched every corner of the property, calling Hope's name into the darkness. But the mare was gone, leaving only hollow silence in her wake. As the search proved futile, Selena sat heavily by the barn door. She clutched Hope's blue halter in her trembling hands, the familiar leather worn smooth from use. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she stared into the night. "I'll find you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No matter what it takes." Selena and Jake hunched over her laptop in the dim kitchen light, their faces illuminated by the screen's glow. The security footage played silently before them, showing shadowy figures moving through the darkness of her property. Jake leaned forward, adjusting the brightness. "There," he pointed, his finger tracing the movement on screen. The footage showed 3 masked men leading Hope from her stall. The mare resisted at first, but they forced her into a waiting trailer. Selena's hands clenched into fists as she watched them drive away, the trailer's tail lights disappearing in the direction of Grayson's estate. "I should have had better security," Selena whispered, her voice thick with regret. Jake squeezed her shoulder. "This isn't your fault." He pulled out his phone and stepped away to make a call, speaking in hushed tones. When he returned, his expression was grim but determined. "My source just confirmed it. Grayson's holding a private auction tomorrow night. They're selling off horses from the Concord program, including the ones they considered defective." Selena's heart clenched. "Hope will be there." Sarah arrived an hour later, and they gathered around Selena's kitchen table, mapping out their plan. Jake would pose as a wealthy buyer interested in Grayson's program, with Selena acting as his assistant. Sarah would coordinate with local law enforcement from a nearby location, ready to move in once they gathered concrete evidence. "I've already contacted some officers I trust," Sarah explained, spreading out a map of Grayson's estate. "They'll be stationed here and here, waiting for my signal." As they worked through the details, Selena felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Her hands shook as she sorted through the fake credentials Jake had prepared. "What if," she started, her voice breaking, "what if we're too late? What if they've already hurt her again?" Sarah moved to Selena's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You saved her once, Selena. You'll save her again. Hope is strong. She proved that by surviving everything they did to her before." Later that night, Selena stood alone in her barn, staring at Hope's empty stall. The mare's absence felt like a physical ache in her chest. Moonlight filtered through the barn windows, casting long shadows across the scattered hay, where Hope should have been sleeping peacefully. "Hold on, girl," she said softly, her words barely a whisper in the quiet barn. "I'm coming for you." The night air hung heavy with tension as Selena and Jake pulled up to the remote auction site. Their rental car's headlights swept across a fortress-like building surrounded by armed security guards. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as more vehicles arrived, their occupants dressed in expensive suits and carrying briefcases. "Ready?" Jake whispered, adjusting his tie. Selena nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her blazer. They passed through security with their carefully forged credentials, entering a warehouse-turned-auction house. The space was transformed with elegant draping and strategic lighting, but nothing could mask the fear emanating from the rows of stalls along the walls. Selena's breath caught in her throat. Each stall held a horse, and many bore the telltale surgical scars of the Concord program. Their eyes were wide with terror, bodies tense. Some paced nervously, while others stood completely still, as if trying to disappear. On a raised platform at the front of the room, Victor Grayson presided over the gathering like a king on his throne. His expensive suit and confident smile made Selena's stomach turn. He gestured to his associates, laughing at some private joke while pointing toward the frightened horses. Jake squeezed her arm gently before moving toward a group of guards, launching into an animated discussion about security protocols. The distraction worked. The guards turned their attention to Jake, leaving the holding area momentarily unguarded. Selena slipped through the door, her heart pounding. The holding area was dimmer than the main room, filled with the sounds of nervous horses. She moved quietly past each stall until she saw her, Hope, huddled in a corner, her coat dull with stress but unmistakable. "Hey, sweet girl," Selena whispered, approaching slowly. Hope's ears pricked forward at the familiar voice, and she lifted her head. Selena reached through the bars, stroking the mare's neck. "I've got you now." Before she could work on the stall's lock, voices echoed from the entrance. Selena ducked into a shadowy corner, pressing herself against the wall, as two of Grayson's men entered. "Boss wants the trailer ready by midnight," one said, checking his phone. "We're moving the rest of them to the facility in Montana tomorrow." "Good," the other replied. "Too many eyes around here lately. Montana's perfect. Middle of nowhere. No questions asked." They moved through quickly, but Selena remained frozen until their footsteps faded completely. Her heart racing, she crept back to the main room where Jake waited anxiously by a refreshment table. "We need to act fast," she whispered when she reached him. "Hope isn't the only one in danger." They shared a determined look, both knowing they were about to risk everything. Selena and Jake huddled in the shadows outside the holding area, their breaths visible in the cold night air. The distant sound of bidding echoed from the main auction room. "I'll plant the camera near the podium," Jake whispered, patting his jacket pocket. "Wait for my signal before going back in." Selena nodded, gripping the bolt cutters hidden beneath her blazer. They watched as Jake slipped back into the auction room, moving casually among the crowd. Through the open door, they could hear Grayson's voice growing louder as he approached the podium. Jake positioned himself near a decorative plant, pretending to examine his phone while deftly securing the tiny camera with a clear view of the auction block. He caught Selena's eye and gave a subtle nod. The camera captured Grayson's commanding presence as he addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, What you're witnessing tonight is the future of equine excellence. Our breeding program pushes the boundaries of what's possible, creating superior specimens through carefully controlled methods. While the audience was captivated by Grayson's speech, Selina crept back to the holding area. Her hands trembled as she worked the bolt cutters on Hope's stall. The metal gave way with a soft snap. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Selina pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering in her chest. Hope let out a frightened whinny, drawing the attention of an approaching handler. "Who's there?" he called out, reaching for his radio. In that moment, Selina made a split-second decision. She stepped out of the shadows, standing tall despite her fear. "What happens to the horses that don't sell?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The handler stumbled backward, startled by her sudden appearance. You're not supposed to be here." "Answer me," Selina insisted, moving closer. "What happens to them?" "Look, I just follow orders," he stammered. "The ones that don't sell, Grayson has a place in Montana, remote. They'll be transported there tomorrow night for disposal." Selina's blood ran cold. Without hesitation, she grabbed a length of rope from a nearby tack hook and quickly subdued the handler, securing him to a support beam. Working swiftly, she freed Hope and several other horses from their stalls. The animals seemed to sense the urgency, following Hope's lead as Selina guided them toward the back exit. Their hooves made soft sounds against the concrete floor as they moved through the shadows. At the door, Selina paused, looking back at the auction house where Grayson's voice still rang out. "Just a little longer, girl," she whispered to Hope. "We're almost out." Sarah's fingers flew across her phone's keypad as she contacted the local authorities. At first, the dispatcher seemed skeptical, but when Sarah mentioned the evidence Jake had gathered, the tone changed dramatically. "We have clear footage of illegal breeding practices, animal abuse, and documentation of the Concord program," Sarah explained, her voice firm. "This isn't just speculation anymore." Within the hour, police vehicles gathered discreetly along the back roads near the auction site. Officers reviewed Jake's footage on tablets, their expressions growing grimmer with each passing minute. The police captain nodded solemnly as he watched Grayson's speech about his elite breeding program. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, signaling his teams to get into position. Meanwhile, Selina and Jake rendezvoused at the property's edge, leading Hope and the other rescued horses through the darkness. Hope stayed close to Selina, drawing comfort from her gentle touch. The other horses followed quietly, as if understanding the need for silence. "You're doing great, girl," Selina whispered, stroking Hope's neck. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the auction house. "Check the perimeter!" a man yelled. "Find those horses!" Before Grayson's men could organize a search, police sirens pierced the night. Red and blue lights flooded the property as squad cars converged on the auction house. Guards scattered in panic, some dropping their weapons, others freezing in place as officers ordered them to the ground. Through the chaos, Selina spotted Grayson bursting through a side door, briefcase in hand. He made it halfway to his car before Jake stepped out from behind a police officer, his camera recording everything. "Going somewhere, Mr. Grayson?" Jake called out. Grayson straightened his jacket, maintaining his composure. "This is a private event on private property. You have no right." "We have every right," an officer interrupted, holding up a warrant. Another officer approached with evidence bags containing the journal and notebook. "And we have more than enough evidence of your illegal breeding operation." "Those documents prove nothing," Grayson scoffed, but his confident smile faltered when the officer held up a tablet showing the hidden camera footage from the auction. The color drained from Grayson's face as he watched himself detail the Concord program's practices. Without another word, he held out his wrists as an officer approached with handcuffs. Selina and Jake watched from their position as more officers led horses from the holding area. The animals emerged into the floodlights, their scarred bodies telling silent stories of abuse and neglect. Hope pressed against Selina's shoulder, her warm breath tickling Selina's ear in what felt like a gesture of gratitude. The barn hummed with activity as volunteers moved purposefully through the aisles, carrying lumber and tools. The sound of hammering and friendly chatter filled the air as new stalls took shape. Selina watched with pride as members of the community worked together, transforming her modest sanctuary into something bigger than she'd ever imagined. "These support beams look solid," called out Tom, a local carpenter who'd volunteered his expertise. "We'll have 3 more stalls ready by sundown." The rescued horses from Grayson's estate occupied temporary paddocks, each receiving careful attention from a dedicated team of volunteers. Veterinarians had established a rotation schedule, ensuring every animal got the medical care they needed. In the main paddock, Selina worked with Hope, guiding her through gentle exercises. The mare's transformation was remarkable. Gone was the frightened, skeletal creature from the woods. Hope's dark coat gleamed in the sunlight, and her steps were strong and sure. She trotted confidently beside Selina, head held high. "Look at you go, girl," Selina said softly, her heart swelling with pride. The crunch of gravel announced Jake's arrival. He walked up to the paddock fence, grinning as he watched Hope's graceful movements. "I've got some good news," he called out. The prosecutor just filed formal charges against Grayson and his whole operation. Animal cruelty, illegal breeding practices, fraud, the works. He patted his camera bag. Our evidence sealed the deal. Selina's eyes welled with happy tears. "They can't hurt any more horses," she whispered. Inside the barn office, Jake handed her a letter. The return address showed Lydia's name. Selina opened it carefully, reading the heartfelt words of thanks from the former whistleblower. Lydia expressed her gratitude for Selina's courage in exposing Grayson's cruel practices. The letter sparked something in Selina. Looking around at the expanding barn, the dedicated volunteers, and the healing horses, she knew what she had to do. "I want to make this official," she told Jake. "Turn it into a real rehabilitation center for abused and neglected horses." Jake nodded approvingly. "You've already got the town's support. Why not?" As evening approached, Selina settled onto her porch, watching Hope graze peacefully in the golden light. The mare lifted her head occasionally, nickering softly to the other horses nearby. Jake joined Selina, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. They clinked glasses in a quiet toast to their victory. "This is just the beginning," Selina said, her voice filled with hope. The morning sun cast a warm glow over Hope's Haven as volunteers and supporters gathered for the sanctuary's grand opening. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the air buzzed with excitement. Selina stood at the entrance, greeting each arrival with a heartfelt smile. Dr. Rachel Martin arrived early, carrying a basket of fresh apples for the horses. "This place has transformed beautifully," she said, hugging Selina. Sarah and Jake weren't far behind, both beaming with pride at how far the sanctuary had come. The once modest barn had evolved into a state-of-the-art facility with spacious stalls, a medical treatment area, and rehabilitation paddocks. Every detail reflected Selina's commitment to providing the best care possible for abused and neglected horses. "Welcome to Hope's Haven," Selina addressed the gathered crowd. "1 year ago, this was just a dream. Today, it's a reality because of all of you." Hope stood beside her, head held high, her coat gleaming in the sunlight. The mare's transformation served as living proof of what love and dedication could achieve. Gone were the surgical scars and fearful eyes, replaced by strength and confidence. As Selina led the tour through the facility, she introduced each rescued horse and shared their stories. There was Thunder, a former racing horse who'd been abandoned. Luna, rescued from an illegal breeding operation, and Starlight, found neglected in a forgotten field. Each horse represented a second chance at life. Every horse here has a story of survival, Selina explained, pausing at each stall. But more importantly, they have a future filled with love and care. During the lunch break, Jake approached Selina with news displayed on his phone. Grayson's appeal was denied, he announced, grinning. The conviction stands. He's not getting out anytime soon. Selina felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The man responsible for Hope's suffering and countless other horses would face justice. Sarah squeezed her hand in support, while Dr. Rachel nodded approvingly. As the afternoon progressed, Selina watched volunteers demonstrate rehabilitation techniques and share success stories. Hope walked beside her throughout the day, occasionally touching her nose to visitors' hands, showing how far she'd come from the terrified mare in the woods. The sanctuary buzzed with activity, children learning about horse care, families adopting rescued horses, and volunteers signing up for regular shifts. What had started with one desperate cry in the woods had grown into a haven of healing and hope. As the event wound down, Selina found herself in the paddock with Hope. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She ran her fingers through Hope's silky mane, remembering the skeletal wounded horse she'd found that fateful morning. "You gave me hope," she whispered to the mare, stroking her neck. "And now, we'll give that to so many others." Hope nuzzled against her shoulder, their bond unbreakable as they stood together in the fading light. If you enjoyed the story of Selina and Hope, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.